climate action team, and we're a group of volunteers, nonpartisan, and we just like to get together once a month and talk about different topics on climate change and how to mitigate it. And our name comes from intent is to have a climate action plan. So we're a climate action team of Fallbrook. There are larger groups that we associate with in San Diego County doing the same thing. And part of a climate action plan is to have to look at clean energy, transit options, zero waste. We've talked about all these things in different months. But one of the main parts of climate change mitigation is land management. You can't plant trees if you don't have land to do it in. And the land that we do have trees on, we want to keep them alive. And so tonight, Susan Liebes, who is from Virginia, I believe graduate of the University of Virginia.
Oh, Virginia Tech.
Virginia Tech, excuse me. I think there was somebody signed up here tonight with your a name like yours from Alexandria.
Exactly. My mother's joining us from Alexandria, Virginia. And she has a native plant garden of Virginia natives at her house.
Oh, cool.
So Susan's a longtime environmentalist, as you can tell. And her mother probably brought her into it. And she also has been the chairperson for the Fallbrook Land Conservancy for several years. And so I'm going to let Susan tell us all about that. Go ahead, Susan.
Great. Thank you, Tom. Thank you for inviting me to speak tonight, and nice to see all of you here. Lots of friendly faces that I know, and some new folks. And as I said, I'm sure a lot of you already know a lot of what I'm going to say, but I will give you a kind of a little tour of the Fallbrook Land Conservancy preserves and the beautiful wildflowers that you can find there. Let me start sharing my screen so you have something to look at other than all right, can you all see that beautiful field of wildflowers?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
All right. So yes, I'm the chair of the Fallbrook Land Conservancy, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to acquiring, managing, and protecting open space in perpetuity for the benefit of wildlife and the community. And the FLC was established in 1988. It was a truly grassroots organization that started right here in Fallbrook. A local group of friends got together and realized that Fallbrook was not going to stay rural and beautiful as it is without someone formally protecting the open space that we enjoy. And so they started by actually mapping the open space around Fallbrook and found out that very little of it was formally protected. And so that's when they incorporated as a nonprofit and started acquiring properties. At this point, we have formally protected over 4,000 acres of open space. Most of that's in San Diego County, a little bit in Riverside County, and we're expanding more into Riverside around Temecula. And most of that is in around Fallbrook, but we do have some properties as far away as Lakeside and San Marcos, Ramona. So we're all across the county now. And many of our preserves are open to the public. The ones that are free of charge to everyone who wants to use them. And they have trails for recreation, for walking, hiking, running, bike riding, pushing strollers, walking dogs, all those great things. We also plant trees by way of our Save Our Forest Committee, which I know many of you have volunteered with. And we also do environmental education. Save Our Forest environmental education program reaches over 1,000 students in our public schools every year. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through the slides. And I'm super happy to be here tonight to talk about native plants and wildflowers. But I wanted to put that in the context of climate change and how what we do as a nonprofit helps in the fight against climate change. As I'm sure you all know, plants absorb CO2. That's how they breathe. And it's not just, big redwood trees that do that. It's all plants and grasslands. Chaparral, which is our dominant habitat type in California, also absorb CO2. So that's a really important ecosystem service that our open lands provide, and they can't do that if they're covered with concrete. So the importance of protecting open space is not just for us humans, but for all the species that need clean air to breathe. The USGS estimates that terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems in the US are significant carbon sinks, taking up approximately 1/4 of the nation's CO2 emissions. So best case scenario is if we can protect natural habitats as they are before they get developed. Next best thing is restoring habitat on open spaces. So when we're looking for, when the Land Conservancy is looking for properties to acquire, we're going to look first for really high quality habitat that we can protect, before it gets degraded. And then if any portions of those are already degraded, we'll work on restoring them. In addition to just protecting the habitat itself, when we plant trees, of course, we're helping with the heat islands. We're helping to bring down the temperature in our urban landscapes. So it's really important for that as well. And also, as the climate changes, our wildlife is going to have to adapt. And some of our species are going to have to adapt by moving locations. It's going to get too hot for them in lower elevations. They're going to have to move to higher elevations or more northerly latitudes. And as they're moving, they're going to need places to stop along the way. As birds migrate, of course, they need places to stop along the way. But as our wildlife has to shift because of climate change, they're going to need places to find sanctuary. And every spot that we can preserve, even if it's a small area, could provide that critical piece that is going to provide a place for an animal to find food and shelter and maybe survive when they wouldn't have otherwise. And in addition to the benefits to our ecosystem, there's a lot of benefits to humans of having open space in our communities and trails for recreation. Of course, the physical benefits are well known, and more we're learning about the mental health benefits, particularly when it comes to climate change. There's a growing body of evidence that there is real anxiety and depression caused by the news that we hear every day about climate change. I know I feel it. And one of the best things you can do to alleviate that is get outside and go for a walk, enjoy a beautiful open space preserve, see the plants and animals that are growing there, and be reminded of what we're fighting for in our environment, and get some exercise and fresh air. Volunteering is also a great way to both mitigate for climate and to improve your mental health. And the Fallbrook Land Conservancy has many volunteer opportunities available every week, every month, lots of different types of things that we do. So that's a great way to get involved in the community, to fight climate change, and also to learn about our local flora and fauna, which is going to benefit you if you want to replicate natural habitats in your own yard and do some gardening with native plants. I'm going to point out some of the plants on our preserves that are appropriate for the home garden. I'm not going to talk a ton about native plant gardening because Rosalie did a really great presentation in this series a few months ago about native plant gardening. So if you want more information on really how to plant and maintain native plants in your garden, I suggest you look back at that recording. But I do have on my slides a little house icon that will show you plants that I think are particularly well suited for the home garden and that I recommend using. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about why that's a good thing, planting native plants in your own yard, as well as protecting open space with our native plants. You know, we live here in Southern California, or most of us live in Southern California, or wherever you live. There are plants that are particular to that place, that are endemic to that place or native to that place. And when you plant native plants in your yard, it really gives you a sense of place. You know, if you're growing roses or, you know, something that you're going to find in the Home Depot nursery section, you could be anywhere in the world. You could be in an English tea garden in London. But if you're growing black sage or Cleveland sage, every time you smell that plant, you're going to be reminded that you are right here in Southern California, and it's going to give you a sense of place that will help root you to this place and also honor the place that you live. Native plants also require a lot less input of water, fertilizer, chemicals, all those things that we need to use less of. And by way of that, less money. So they're going to save you money after the initial investment. And then if you plant native plants in your home garden, you are going to be providing habitat for our native wildlife. So our native wildlife, our birds, our butterflies, all those things that we love to see out in nature, those things that are native here, they need native plants to survive. They have evolved with the plants that grow locally, and many of them are specialists, so they can only use certain plants, certain native plants. And if you plant, you know, those roses, which are beautiful, there's not as many plants, not as many native animals that can use those plants as food, shelter. They just don't know how to use them because they haven't evolved with them. So if we want to have butterflies and birds and all those beautiful things, we have to plant the plants that they need to survive. And you can do that at home. There's a great program called Homegrown National Park, where you can become part of a network of people who are trying to make these kind of little mini parks in their yards and contribute to the restoration of habitat across the country. So now I will get started with our slideshow here. And I'm going to take you on a little tour of, I'm trying to get my Zoom set up here so I can see everybody and still see what I'm talking about. Oops. All right. So we're gonna go on a little tour of preserves, and this is a map of the FLC preserves in Fallbrook that are open to the public, and the ones that we're going to visit by Zoom tonight. And we're going to start with Montserrat Mountain Preserve, which is over on the east side of Fallbrook, off of the 15. It's the big tall mountain that you can see from the 15. And when we talk about what plants we're going to see at a preserve, we need to think about what habitat type, and that will kind of give us an idea of what plants we can expect to see on that property. So Montserrat Mountain is chaparral habitat. It's one of our two types of chaparral, which cover most of California. And at Montserrat Mountain, we have coastal sage scrub chaparral. And so there you're going to find plants, and I'm not going to read every name because I have a lot of pictures of plants here and I don't want to keep you guys all night. But the plants that you're going to find in the chaparral habitat are going to be super tough, drought tolerant, hardy plants, things that can get all of the moisture they need in the winter months, in our rainy winter months, and then survive, 9 months of summer with no rain whatsoever. And here you can see the first one of our recommended home garden plants. This little house indicates that Ceanothus, not just woolly leaf Ceanothus, but the entire Ceanothus genus is a great garden plant. There's a variety of sizes and colors, mostly blue, but some white, but everything from a ground cover to a 8-foot tall, 10-foot wide shrub that could create a really nice privacy hedge. So whatever your need is in your garden, whatever space you have, you can find a Ceanothus that'll fit it. And all of them have these amazing smelling flowers that blanket the hillsides in the springtime. If you are driving on the 15 and you notice sort of a blue tint to the hillside, that's our native Ceanothus blooming on the hillsides. California buckwheat is another really important member of the coastal sage scrub community. These plants are one of my favorites because they're super drought tolerant, super tough, and they spread out. They create, they have these branches that grow low along the ground and create all sorts of little places for animals to hide, to find cover from predators, and to hide their babies. And then they bloom profusely all summer long. It's an absolute smorgasbord for pollinators. And then in the fall, when the flowers have been pollinated and they start to produce seeds, the finches, all the birds have a great time with those buckwheat seeds. This is a kind of an interesting plant on Montserrat, Perry's tetracoccus. It's a rare plant because it only grows in very iron-rich soils. Not one I recommend for the home garden because you probably don't have iron-rich soils in your yard. And it's not a super pretty plant, but it is kind of interesting because of that requirement, because it requires specialized soils. Its range is very limited. And so this is one of the species that really benefits from land protection. There's not like a Perry's tetracoccus group out there that's dedicated to just saving this plant. Nobody's fighting for this. It's not one of our charismatic species. But if we protect habitat, we're going to protect everything that grows within that habitat. So plants like this, which are really interesting, which are an important part of our ecosystem, are going to be under that umbrella of protection. And it's important for plants and animals also that have a really restricted range, like the tetracoccus, because if a plant or an animal already has a really restricted range, and then a lot of that range is being developed into human development, like Southern California is, there's very few places left that this plant could even exist. So it's important that we protect a variety of habitats across the state. Clustered tarweed, not the prettiest name. I know a botanist who's trying to rebrand it as tar plant, but I think is a really beautiful flower. It's an annual that comes up in masses on Montserrat Mountain, and I think it's just starting to bloom now. I haven't been out in a week or so, but it's a really pretty little annual. Black sage is another one, along with California buckwheat, that is really a foundation of the coastal sage scrub community. It has an amazing scent. It's also super drought tolerant and great for restoration, or if you have a big slope where there's a lot of erosion. These plants, you plant them, you water them, just to get them established, and then you can stop watering them and they'll spread out and cover a lot of soil and help hold the soil in place. And as you can see, it's used by the Anna's swallowtail and a lot of our other native wildlife. This is, oh, look, there's Will Shakespeare. This is one of our, and you were probably there too, Pat. This is one of our field trips out to Montserrat from our Save Our Forest Environmental Education program. This program starts when the students are in 4th grade. We go into their classrooms, give them a little lesson on conservation, water conservation, and why native plants are important, and also why volunteering in our community is important. Since we're an unincorporated community, if we want to have nice things, we have to help out and make them happen. And then the kids get to go outside and pot up a native plant from a little 2-inch pot into a 1 gallon. And then when they're in 5th grade, they come on a field trip out to one of our preserves and plant those 1 gallon plants in the ground as part of a habitat restoration project. And this was 3 years ago now. As you can see, it was during COVID. The kids were still wearing masks, and they plant their plant in the ground. And then I get to take them on a nature walk, which is super fun. The kids are so smart. They've learned so much in school. Our science curriculum these days is amazing. At this point in 5th grade, they've already learned about food webs. They've learned about the water cycle. They know all about erosion and fire and all of the natural things that happen. And they know a lot about habitat. So when I take them out there, I can prompt them. They already know, what I'm asking when I ask them the question. They've got the answers. And they're able to see in person those things that they've been learning about in the classroom. They're able to see intact habitat and see what happens to a trail when there's erosion. And they take part and they actually volunteer on the spot. So we're hoping that will create a connection with them that will make them want to volunteer and be environmentalists their entire lives. And this was an especially rewarding year because these kids, this was, as I said, towards the end of COVID, and this was the first field trip these kids had had in 2 years. So they were very excited to be out there. The teacher was very excited to have them out there, even with the masks on. So crossing over the 15 now, going towards Fallbrook, our next little preserve is the Ingle Family Preserve. And this is a smaller property. It's also coastal sage scrub, but it has a different aspect than Montserrat Mountain. It's east facing, so it's a little bit cooler, retains a little bit more moisture than the west facing slopes of Montserrat, which really get baked in that afternoon sun. And so we have a little bit more annual flowers like this Perry's Phacelia. Phacelia is a genus of native plants in California, and there's a bunch of different varieties that are all really beautiful, but this is a little very diminutive little annual flower that's fun to find out there. California Suncup is one of our super hardy perennials. It looks like this dainty little flower that would grow in a hothouse, but these plants are growing in decomposed granite, which is basically sand. It holds no moisture. They get, whatever rain we get in the winter, and then it stops at a certain point, and they'll go 9 or 10 months with no water whatsoever. A lot of these plants will go drought deciduous. So, for example, the blue dicks are a bulb that put up this beautiful flower in springtime. And then when it dries out in the middle of summer, you won't see any sign of it. And then next spring, they'll come right back. So pretty amazing plants. Sugar bush and its cousin, the lemonade berry, are a really great hedge plant for the home garden. They're excellent habitat plants on our preserves because they get really large. They stay green all year. And so they provide really nice cover for wildlife. And then they have these little flowers that produce nice berries for the birds. And if you need another great one, if you need a privacy hedge at home, this is a super drought tolerant, super hardy one, along with lemonade berries, a great one. The chaparral yucca, some people know this as our Lord's candle. So this is the big agave that, or big century plant that is really a nice landscaping plant. And then when it flowers, I don't know if this is what most people think of when they think of wildflowers, but these flowers are amazing. They produce practically a whole ecosystem in and of themselves. If you have a chance to get up close and observe these flowers when they're in flower, you'll see just countless pollinators, not just bees and butterflies and the tiny ones, but hummingbirds, orioles, really anything that is a nectar feeder will use these. And then there's so much activity around them, it'll draw in other things, finches and all kinds of birds. So they're really fun to observe and really spectacular when they bloom. Moving towards town, Gurd Valley Preserve is one of our newer properties. And Gurd Valley is a really great property because it has several different habitat types. It's got this open grassland, non-native grassland. It has some chaparral on the hillsides, and then it also has an oak woodland. And anytime you have a place where you have several habitat types coming together, you're going to have a really rich, really diverse ecosystem because you have all of the species that specialize on each of those habitat types. And then you have species that really like the edge of habitats, which are a lot of animals like those edges where they can find the cover of a forest, but they can find, the open spaces where they can hunt for food. In the grassland, you're going to find some really nice diminutive plants like the pansies. They come up early in the spring. Lupins, there's several different types of lupins that bloom at Gurd Valley Preserve. This is one of the larger perennial bush lupins, but there's also annual lupins that are so teeny tiny you'd have to get down on your hands and knees to even be able to see the flowers. Right now, there is a whole field of these checker mallow up there. So if you have the opportunity to walk Gurd Valley Preserve, it's about a mile trail. It's really pretty in the springtime when the flowers are blooming. And I was there about a week ago, and there's still a lot blooming, especially these checker mallows. And there's several populations of Indian paintbrush. These are a cool plant because they are hemiparasitic. which means they get most of their nutrients from a host plant. They can't just grow on their own. So hard to grow in the home garden, but I know someone who's managed to do it, and they're just gorgeous when they have the right lighting on them. So wild cucumber is kind of a funny plant, and it's it doesn't have a real showy flower, but it has these really cool pods that are the seed pods that are that if the flowers are pollinated, they will produce. They're kind of fun to look at. This is another rare plant that has found sanctuary at one of our preserves, and this is not a true milkweed, but it kind of, the flower resembles a milkweed, so it's called Hartwig's climbing milkweed. Getting even closer to town, the Dinwiddie Preserve is on Stagecoach Lane, and there you will find some ancient oak trees, some really beautiful old oak trees. It's a nice place to go for a walk on a hot day because it's very shady. And oaks aren't known usually for their flowers, although they do this year have a lot of flowers on them. They're more known for their fruits, which are acorns. And coast live oaks are one of our native oak trees here in Southern California. And if you have space on your property for a coast live oak tree, it is the single most important native plant you could plant. They are a keystone species, which means there are hundreds of wildlife species that will use them, dozens of caterpillars that will use them, that will then become bird food, and the birds will utilize the acorns. Small animals will utilize the acorns, and lots of things nest in oak trees. So if you have the space, and you need a lot of space because they do get very big, and if you're lucky, a scrub jay will plant an acorn for you. And if you're very lucky, they'll plant it in the right place. Usually they don't. Usually they plant it too close to the house, shading the solar panels, something like that. You will find sacred datura at a lot of our preserves, and definitely at Dinwiddie. I have a little skull there because it is a poisonous plant, but it's not going to jump out and attack you. So as long as you don't put it in your mouth, it's not going to hurt you. If you have young kids, it's an important one to teach them how to identify and to teach them not to touch it. And kids are smart, they can learn that. And as you can see, it's a great pollinator plant and just a gorgeous flower. Most of them are white like this with a little blush of purple, but I saw one at Gird Valley Preserve last week that was almost completely purple. It was really beautiful. So they can vary. There's also, I didn't mention the habitat type at Dinwiddie is oak woodland. So we have those big oak trees, and then we also have some riparian habitat. Now, riparian is the habitat along a stream. And this is super important habitat, especially nowadays because so much of it has been destroyed and there's so little of it left. And it's incredibly important because California is so dry. So we're going to have the most biomass, the most lush growth along those stream corridors, river corridors. And so that's where we're going to have really leafy plants. And that's where our migrating birds especially like to nest, our warblers and vireos, and the things that are real sensitive to exposure. They're going to want to be in a thicket. And the California wild rose is great at creating a thicket. Not everybody could have it in their garden. You'd need a pretty big garden, and you'd probably want to plant it, kind of on the edge of your garden, maybe as a barrier between you and your neighbors, if you want a little security fence, because it does have thorns, but it produces those beautiful flowers. And in the fall, it gets rose hips on it, which are gorgeous fall color. Here in Southern California, we don't get the leaves, but we do get bright red rose hips. And there's a big stand of that at Dinwiddie. There's also this meadow of deer grass. Deer grass is one of my favorite plants for the home garden. You can either have a big mass of it like this to create a meadow or a lawn look, or you can grow them individually on their own, and they look really pretty. And then you can see the flower stalks coming up here. Those were an important source of materials, and still are, for the local Native American tribes in their basket making. Across the street from the Dinwiddie Preserve is the Palomares House and Park. And a few years ago, This is what it looked like. This is the headquarters of the Fallbrook Land Conservancy. And back when the Land Conservancy was created, some of our founders and supporters bought this property and donated it to the Land Conservancy for our offices. And then part of it is also a community meeting space. And this house was built in 1888. It was part of the original Rancho Montserrat. And I'm sure Tom could tell you a lot more about the history of this place. That's a whole story in and of itself. But this is what it looked like up until a few years ago when we did a major renovation. We painted the house, and then we renovated. We took out all those boring hedges and the non-native water-hungry Bermuda grass lawn, and replaced it all with native plants. We put in gutters and rain catchment and rain gardens, and we were able to pay for all of it with rebates from the county and from Municipal Water District. And thanks to the backbreaking labor of many, many volunteers, including our native plant team, the Rotary Club, some Marines, Boy Scouts, pretty much anybody I could rope into helping. And so this is what it looked like 1 year after planting all native plants around the Palomares house. And one of the fun things with the home garden or a garden like this, when we're planting and we're restoring habitat on our preserves, we want to plant what would traditionally be there, what was there before humans, before Europeans came. We want to plant the straight species, which means the species that would naturally be there. So California buckwheat, the black sage, California sagebrush, plants that, don't always look great all year, but they provide really great wildlife habitat, and it's what the wildlife is looking for. If we're planting in the home garden, we can be a little more creative, and we can plant things that are more focused on our own enjoyment and not just the animals. It'll still be valuable to the animals and to the wildlife, but it can be more pleasing to the human eye. And so we can use what are called cultivars. And those are plants that have been selected in the nursery or by botanists for certain attributes. So maybe bigger flowers or a longer bloom time, or more tolerant of garden conditions. And so this Allen Chickering sage, which is pictured here, is one of those cultivars. So it was taken from the Cleveland sage, which is a native species, and it was selected for certain attributes, and now it's sold. It has to be cloned. These won't grow from seed, or they won't be the same if they grow from seed, but they're cloned and they're sold in nurseries. And this is one of the many cultivars of Cleveland sage. But as you can see, it blooms profusely. It's super attractive to hummingbirds, bumblebees, all sorts of pollinators, and it's gorgeous. So you can have a native plant garden that is beautiful to humans and to wildlife. On the left side here, you can see we replaced the Bermuda grass lawn with it's actually a sedge. It's not a grass. It's called clustered field sedge. And I should have a close-up with that with the name. I don't think I do, but it is a drought-tolerant native plant that can take foot traffic. We have 400 people walk over it during Stagecoach Sunday every year, and it's just fine. It can be mowed short, or it can be kept long, and so that makes kind of a nice lawn there. These are some of the other cultivars that we have that are chosen for their flowers and long bloom periods. And all of these plants are on a list on our website, which I put into the chat on the Palomares House page. And so I'll give you a link directly to that list. So if any of these are plants that you want to grow in your home garden, you can find them on that list. This yellow iris and many others are cultivars from the Douglas iris, which is a native, and the nursery people have created a whole rainbow of irises off of the Douglas iris. Blue-eyed grass is another one of my favorites. I mentioned a lot of favorite plants, but this is one of my favorites. This is actually a straight species, so you'll find this just like this in the wild, but it also grows really well in a garden. It's a Great plant for a rain garden, which we have at the Palomares house to capture the rainwater that's coming off the roof. And excuse me, it's a great plant for that because it can handle getting a lot of water in the winter and even being submerged, having its roots submerged. And then in the summertime, when it dries out, it'll survive even under the drought conditions. So it's very adaptable. Yarrow is a similar plant, very adaptable, beautiful foliage and beautiful flowers. This is a newer plant to me, but has quickly become one of my favorites. It's also known as San Diego County sunflower, and it's a super hardy and blooms almost all year. And of course, there are an array of monkey flowers that are native to Southern California, and you'll find those on our preserves and these cultivars, or actually these aren't even cultivars, these are straight, but there are some cultivars at the Palomares house. So they're a fun plant to get into because you can have everything from yellow, orange, red, burgundy. There's even some that are like striated. Nursery people have fun with those. And here's the yellow monkey flower juxtaposed with the blue sage that I really love, that combination of yellow and blue. And of course, anytime you're planting wildlife habitat, you should include some milkweed. The narrowleaf milkweed is our local native milkweed, and the milkweed genus is the most important plant in the monarch life cycle. It is the food source for the monarch caterpillar, and as I'm sure you've heard, our monarchs are having a terrible time. Their population is really in trouble. And if we all plant a milkweed in our yard, they'll be much better off. It's really amazing. It's just miraculous to me how these little insects, they're flying from Mexico. They come flying over Fallbrook, and somehow they sense, down in this one garden, there's the plant that they need to lay their eggs on to further their species. And somehow they, I have to say, narrowleaf milkweed is not the prettiest plant. It has a pretty flower, but most of the year it's not like the most spectacular plant. So I tend to plant it kind of in amongst other things, which is good for the monarch because after the caterpillar finishes eating the leaves and is ready to go build its cocoon, it's actually going to crawl away from the milkweed, and it wants to crawl up something else to make its cocoon. So if there's a sage or something else nearby that it can crawl over to, it'll go up and it'll find a nice spot where it will have some cover and make its cocoon. So it's amazing. These little plants are hidden amongst other plants, and I'll be out there in the garden, and here will come a monarch butterfly flitting down and make a beeline right for the plant that it needs. And they really go crazy when they find one laying eggs all over it. And so it'll bring a lot of life to your yard if you have some milkweed. Across the parking lot from the Palomares house is Wildlife Sculpture Garden, another wonderful place to visit. And the last couple of years, we have had a poppy super bloom in the sculpture garden. It is home to, I've lost track of how many sculptures we have now because we've been adding so many, thanks to Beverly Tucker, who is our volunteer who's been leading the charge in restoring and planting this garden. And there's actually a new sculpture over here now, a little heron that wasn't there when this was taken. But the poppies have just been incredible the last couple of years, and they're super easy to grow, especially if you have bare ground. It's harder to grow if you have areas that have been mulched really heavily, which a lot of us do to try to keep the weeds down. So that's good for keeping weeds down, but it's also makes it harder to grow annuals like poppies. So if you have bare ground, you throw out some poppy seeds and you can have it look like that. And once the poppies are done, you can see in the sculpture garden still there's a structure of nice shrubs like this manzanita. Manzanita is another genus, kind of like the Ceanothus I showed you earlier, that has a huge variety of different species. Some are low growing ground covers, only a couple inches tall. And then there are tree forms that, get 8 to 10 feet tall. So depending on how much space you have and, what kind of look you want, you can find a manzanita that will fit the bill. And they are super, super hardy some of the most drought tolerant plants you'll find. In fact, they really don't like being watered, and you can kill them with many of these native plants you could kill with too much water. And they have beautiful berries in the springtime, which hummingbirds love, and other pollinators. This is a nice garden plant, the Santa Cruz Island buckwheat. I showed you the California buckwheat. There are, I don't even know how many different species of buckwheats in California that are native here. And so you could do a whole garden just of buckwheats. There's red buckwheats, which have bright red flowers. There's sulfur buckwheats, which have these sulfur yellow flowers. So there's a wide variety, and they're some are harder to find than others, but they're all really nice for the garden. But this one is particularly tidy in the garden. It keeps a nice form, and it gets covered with these lovely flowers. So it's a really nice one for the home garden. And now we're going down to Heller's Bend Preserve, which is down on South Mission Road. And it is another preserve where we have a couple different habitat types. We have a riparian area. So Ostrich Farm Creek runs from Fallbrook down South Mission Road and eventually connects to San Luis Rey River. And that riparian zone along South Mission Road is super important wildlife habitat. You're going to find some huge coast live oaks down there, and also a lot of willows. Willows are one of our most important riparian species in California, and you're going to find those along any river or stream in California practically. Also miner's lettuce. This is a plant that needs a little more moisture and less shade. It is edible. Oh, and now I think it has a new name now that's more politically correct. It's like, I forget what it's called. I need to update my slides. But they're really, really beautiful. You can see it's got a teeny tiny little flower. And then this big calyx. And then other little annual wildflowers that will show up at Heller's Bend in the springtime. And then as you get up to the higher elevations of the preserve, you get back into that coastal sage scrub chaparral plant community, where you'll see some of those species that can handle a lot more sun and less moisture as you get higher on the mountain. And then you have a beautiful view of Fallbrook from the top. And then in the heart of Fallbrook, you'll find Los Higueros Preserve. This was the first preserve in the Fallbrook Land Conservancy portfolio that was it was acquired in 1990, and it's got 47 acres of a few different habitat types, the coastal sage scrub, the oak woodland, and some more riparian. And one of the most dominant plants you'll see there is the bush sunflower. This is a great plant for the home garden. Beautiful flowers, super easy to grow, reseeds readily. So each one of these flowers will create hundreds of seeds, and they will grow anywhere that they possibly can. I just love buckwheat, so I have to feature the buckwheat again. This is the Cleveland sage that the sages at the Palomares house came from. They have similar flowers. Toyon is another great hedge shrub, large shrub that could be used for a hedge, and also great wildlife habitat because it stays green all year, provides great cover, has nice little white flowers, and then around Christmas time gets these beautiful red berries that are known as California holly. We also have a couple of western redbuds there, which bloom. Some of the first things that bloom in the springtime, and they bloom before they leaf out, so they're really spectacular. There's an eastern version of this, and those are sometimes planted as street trees, and there's some of those in the sculpture garden, but our western redbud is just as pretty. And the Matalia poppies, which are blooming right now, are some of our most spectacular wildflowers. They are great in the home garden if you have a large space where they can spread out, but they will take every inch you can give them. They are great though because they don't need any water after they're established. And as you can see, the pollinators love them, and they're just glorious when they're flowering. We've got milkweed at Los Higueros. So we have monarchs. And there's a couple of different kinds of milkweeds at Los Higueros. This is another native, local native. Here's the fifth graders planting at Los Higueros years ago. They planted there again this year in a different spot. But I wanted to show you this picture because this is the area where they planted. And actually, this isn't even the most recent view of that area, but you can see the beautiful habitat that they created. So their volunteer work was really important work that they're doing. It's not just for their education. It's actually really helping us to restore acres and acres of land. And, every one of these plants is absorbing carbon dioxide all day, every day. This is an interesting plant, vinegar weed. If you brush by it or accidentally step on it, you will get a nose full of very strong vinegar smell, and you'll know exactly what it is. This red plant up front here is California fuchsia. This is another great one for the home garden, super drought tolerant, and it blooms in the fall when other things have kind of gone dormant. This is a beautiful sculpture at Los Higueros, and we've got some nice plantings all around it to set it off and make it even more beautiful. And the original Doug iris, that yellow iris that I showed you is a cultivar of this one, and this is a straight species growing there. Bladderpod's a great native plant. It's kind of quirky. It's got these weird pods that are the seed pods, but they bloom almost all year and are great habitat plants and reseed really easily, which is nice if you're wanting your garden to expand. This is another rare plant that we're a little bit outside its range, but someone planted one at Los Higueros. And I never really noticed it until it bloomed last year, and it was absolutely covered in flowers, and the hummingbirds were going crazy over it. And it made me realize that it's really, really nice plant. And there are several different types of penstemon at Los Higueros. California has hundreds of different species of native penstemon, and they are all just, I don't know if they all are, but many of them are really spectacular and make great garden plants. So those are a great way to bring some color to your garden. And we have a couple of native gooseberry ribes species. This is one that flowers out in the sun, it grows in the sun and makes these beautiful fuchsia flowers. We also have some that grow in the shade. And elderberry is one of our native trees that we can grow here, and they're amazing because they can handle water, they can handle drought, and they make these huge flowers that are really beautiful this time of year. And then later in the year, they will get purple berries that are a really important food source for birds. And in the wetland part of Los Higueros, we have a mass of this yerba mansa, which are blooming right now. So if you want to see this for yourself, go to Los Higueros and you'll see these beautiful white flowers. These are perennial, so they die back in the summertime when it's dry. And then in the winter, when we start getting some rain and those wetland areas of Los Higueros start flooding, these will start growing back, and then they bloom this time of year and make that beautiful mass. But please stay on the boardwalk. Don't step in them to take pictures like some people do. And I'll put all this in the chat so you guys can have these links. These are some nurseries that provide native plants where you can find these things if you want to grow them yourself. This is information on the rebate program that we used for the Palomares house. If you have a grass lawn, I'd be surprised if anybody in this group still has a grass lawn, but if you do, this is a great way to get paid to remove it. And these are some upcoming events. If you'd like to get involved with the Land Conservancy, we have our fundraiser on July 13th is a formal dinner, which is a lovely soiree. We have a salon for our donors in August, which is a really nice sort of cocktail party with a speaker on an interesting topic. And then Stagecoach Sunday is on October 6th this year. That's our major fundraiser for the year. And I invite all of you to come out and enjoy some barbecue, live music, go for a stagecoach ride, do some shopping in the silent auction, and help support our mission. And I put our website in the chat. And there's links there to volunteer opportunities, how you can donate easily online, and all of our events that I mentioned. And I am happy to take questions if anyone has them.
Go
If
ahead,
we
raise your hand if you have a question. Raise your hand in the reactions.
I have a question.
Yes.
Yes, John, go ahead. John?
Yeah, I'm a fan of dogwood, which you're familiar with being from Virginia. I'm wondering if dogwood can survive out here in California if we transplanted it, or if there's some sort of type of dogwood that is known for California.
There is a dogwood native to California, but not to Southern California. It lives up in the mountains in Yosemite. It grows in Yosemite Valley. I don't think an Eastern dogwood would be happy here because they get a lot more rain throughout the year in the East Coast. Our rain all comes in the winter, and then we get nothing in the summer. So the plants that are going to be happiest here are those plants that are adapted to a Mediterranean climate like we have, that can withstand drought in the summer and get a lot of rain in the winter. You probably could grow a dogwood here. I mean, we can grow pretty much anything in Southern California if we give it enough water. The question is whether or not that's a good idea. And my argument is that if we can choose what to grow, we're going to be doing the best thing for our environment and those things that we share the planet with if we plant what's native to our own local community.
Do I see any more questions?
Okay, well, I got a question.
Let's see.
Got another question. Purple sage,
Let me see if there's any more questions in the chat.
a huge purple sage bush on Rookie by me. Huge. And you mentioned it in your detailing of California plant. Is that native? Is that a import?
So the sages, there are many sages that are native to Southern California. The ones I showed you, the Cleveland sage, there is a purple sage. There's I don't even know how many are native here, and then there's a whole, I don't even know how many cultivars that are that were bred from those natives. So yes, there are plenty of natives. Oh, and I should put I'll put it in the chat. CalScape is a really great resource for finding out what is native and what is not. And you can also here, I'll type it in here. I got to stop talking for a second. CalScape, I believe it's .org. You can go to calscape.org and you can put in your zip code and it'll tell you what grows locally. You can also search plants, specific plants, to find out if they're native. And then they have some they've just renovated the website. They have some great guides to native plants. And I noticed the San Diego County one is good. And the Orange County one, I think, is actually better for Fallbrook than what's listed for San Diego County. And it lists specific plants that are going to do well, and those ones that are most beneficial to the habitat, the buckwheats, sages, the oaks, the things that are going to really support the most wildlife.
Thank you, Susan. We're going to have we'll have this recording available on the Climate Action Team website. It'll be available in a week or two. We'll send an email out to all the attendees so that you know when it's ready.
Okay. Oh, I'm glad to know that I see in the chat, Alicia said she walked Los Higueros, and yeah, right now all of the preserves look as good as they ever have after 2 years of good rain and many hundreds of hours of volunteer work and staff work to control the weeds and to restore the natives. Our preserves are looking really good, especially right now. And the Palomares House garden is spectacular right now. All of those sages are blooming, and all of those places are open during daylight hours. You can go anytime, and just look around and see what's out there and let me know what you find.
Susan, I do have a question. You had just mentioned some weeds, and I'm wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit about invasives and trying to get rid of those, and at the same time as you're trying to introduce natives and what that's like, and maybe any tips you have for other people. I live in an area, a lot of people of us on the call do, with a lot of acreage, and I just see a lot of mustard and thistle that's overtaken everything.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, how you guys battle that yourselves and how you view that as a.
Yeah, it is a battle for sure. And that's a great question. And I could do a whole nother hour just on that. But yeah, there's a whole host of invasive species. So those are plants that are not native here. They are native elsewhere, the continent of Africa or Asia or Europe. They've been brought here either intentionally or accidentally in, nursery trade or agriculture, livestock feed, many different ways. And because if they're those Mediterranean type plants that can grow well in the, with winter rain and summer dry, and they don't have predators here, they're going to explode. So the black mustard you mentioned, we have some newer ones that have really taken hold recently, like the yellow star thistle. It's also known as tocolote. We have, there's a laundry list of them, and it is a real challenge. It's really heartbreaking to see what it's doing to our native lands and our habitat. These plants grow much faster than native plants. A lot of them will germinate and start growing before our native plants, so they get a jump start. And it's really hard, especially when you've already restored a place. You can't go in and just mow it. You've got to work around the native plants and try to remove the invasive plants. So it is a major challenge. It's probably the thing we spend the most time and effort on. Definitely our volunteers spend the most effort on, and our staff spends a huge amount of time. We were fortunate this year, we got a grant from the Community Benefit Program, which is administered through FPUD, to hire a restoration company to come in and do some weed whacking at Los Higueros, because the mustard there is just crazy. But in the home garden, it's challenging. So if you have a lot of acreage, really the best thing you can do is try to cut back those weeds before they go to seed. That's always key, is getting to them before they go to seed and create much more. And if you have a small enough property, or what I recommend to people is, pick an area that's a manageable size and start there. The main thing you have to keep in mind is that nature abhors a vacuum. So you can't just pull weeds and expect nothing to grow. If there's bare dirt, something's going to grow, and it's probably going to be those invasive species that are, they take advantage of that. They take advantage of bare dirt, especially disturbed areas. So that's why you see mustard on the roadsides, and anywhere land is cleared, the first thing that's going to come in are invasive species. So you have to both clear the invasive species and also replace them with something that's going to keep them from coming back. So you can do that. A really great method, which we've been doing under Gisella's direction with the native plant team at Los Higueros, is sheet mulching. And so that's where you put down either cardboard or several layers of newspaper. You overlap it so there's no breaks, and then you cover it with 4 to 6 inches of wood mulch, not compost. You don't want rich soil, but you cover with wood mulch, and that will suffocate the plants that are growing, and also the weed seed. So anywhere you have weeds, you have this seed bank of thousands of seeds in the soil. So you pull the weeds and then the seeds will grow right back. So if you put the cardboard and the mulch down, that stops everything there from growing. Then, if that sat long enough, the weeds would eventually recolonize. So in the meantime, you have to replace the weeds with something native. So then you can cut holes in the cardboard and plant perennials like buckwheat, California buckwheat, black sage, California sagebrush, some of those really drought tolerant plants that I mentioned. that are going to spread out. You plant those 3 to 5 feet apart and water them through the first year to get them established. And then eventually those plants will fill in and they will create, a cover so that there's not those spaces for the invasive plants to come back. And that's what we do with the habitat restoration. We don't do the sheet mulching because it's too big of an area, but we plant the native plants, we weed between them for a couple of years until the plants have filled in. And then, like I said, the invasive plants like disturbed soil. So if you can pull them and let the natives fill in, there no longer will be that opportunity for invasive plants to get in. But it's hard with big acreage, and that's why we have people that walk at Los Higueros and they say the mustard is terrible. We should do something, and it's like we are working really hard, and it's just a really difficult problem that I don't know if we'll ever solve it. I think we can just try to pick and choose our areas that we're going to clear and try to keep ahead of it a little bit.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Susan. That is a really good talk.
Thank you for having me. And, like I said, volunteering is a really great way to learn about this. If you want to learn about sheet mulching, come join us on Wednesday mornings with the native plant team. You will get to lay down cardboard and shovel mulch, and you will be an expert. And then you can do all these things at home, and you'll learn the plants as well, and what to plant. You'll learn the bees and the birds and all sorts of things from all of our wonderful volunteers that share their knowledge with each other.
Good idea. And we'll let everybody know when the recording is ready on our website. I know I tried taking notes. I couldn't do everything.
And I'm happy to answer questions. Find me on Facebook, or Tom can give me my email if you have follow-up questions. I'm always happy to talk about plants.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody.